to the racks every week. Keep craving that rush that you get when you flip to the next page. Life is better when you live in between Wednesdays. Yes, got a massive back.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and today I'm joined by Luke W Henderson to talk about their new comic on Kickstarter now, Sparks. Luke, thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Konrad.
Absolutely. So yeah, same easy question I like to ask everybody. Just for the people out there in YouTube land who have probably never seen your face, maybe they've never heard your name, who is Luke W Henderson?
Well, Luke W Henderson is a writer trying to kind of break into comics, so to speak. I started off writing more journalistic stuff, and eventually just kind of got burnt out on that, and so I moved towards analyzing pop culture on my own Medium blog, and then that kind of led to writing comic reviews for Comic Book Yeti, and then that comics, and then here I am.
Beauty. I love it. Interesting background as well. And so obviously we're now here to talk about your Kickstarter book. So what can you tell me about Sparks?
So Sparks is a collection of short stories that some of them were pitches to anthologies that didn't get accepted, and a couple were just stories that were made, and I hadn't really found a use for them yet, but I didn't want them to go into the graveyard. It's called Sparks because it's supposed to be those little sparks of inspiration you have that hopefully become passionate flames. That's my little tagline that I put in there. And so it's 4 stories. They're all like science fiction and fantasy. The first one is Cleave, which features art by Azul Vaquero, colors by Avery Bacon, and letters by Lucas Tony. It's about these 2 sisters who are in separate guilds of the Galaxy's guild exhibition. So Janice is in the Magic Guild and Lita is in the Science Guild, and they've both made it to the championship round where they get to really show their guild stuff and see who's the better, better at whatever they want to do. It's just an exhibition, so you're supposed to show off. And there's going to be a twist later in the story that shows that Janice may not be everything she seems. She might be she might be being told that she's one thing, and she feels like she's a combination of things.
Right on.
Yeah. And then, the next story then is, I'm hoping, Deceiving Appearances, which this one's kind of inspired by those gag weapons that used to be in Soul Calibur and games like that. So I always loved those because they were the most expensive weapons in the game, but they were the worst. but you would like buy them because you were a completionist and you wanted to complete the game, so you had to buy them to use them. But this story follows a warrior named Dart, who they have just won a battle against this big massive monster, and they're going to collect their prize. And when they do, they pull it out and realize it's an axe that's blades are made from butterfly wings. And so their first thought is, this thing is ridiculous. I can't show this to the people who hired me to do this job, because they're not going to believe that I actually completed it. They're going to believe I just went shopping for trinkets or something. And that axe is going to be more than it appears. And that's kind of a running theme through all the stories. Not everything is always what it seems. Some things you kind of discover yourself in unexpected ways because they're more than what they appear.
You know what? That sounds lovely. Genuinely. Also, the visual for me as a guy who plays a lot of video games, the idea of an axe with made out of butterflies, that's super cool. Also extremely creative. And I like the whole, along with your tagline, of the little sparks that become flames and bigger ideas and thoughts. I like already just the premise of the first 2. I guess easy question to jump into then is what sort of inspired you to write stories like that?
So my favorite stories are the ones that kind of have an underlying message or just a bigger idea underneath that they try to explore in creative ways. That's why some of my favorite writers are like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, because these are big things that they do in their writing. They may be simpler stories, and not necessarily in Alan Moore's case, but But so they might be simpler stories, but they always have a bigger underlying theme that's kind of radiating through everything. So that's kind of what I try to do with my writing, even in these short stories. I always want to come in with some sort of idea that I want to express. I'm not opposed to stories that just have a solid beginning, middle, and end without necessarily discussing anything, but that's just not how I like to write.
No, that's totally fair. For the next question, then, I guess, given that you want to write more, I guess it would be in depth or more chewy stories. Uh, when it comes to your previous writing experience, both reviewing comics and then writing politically, I'm a big fan of asking, how has your past work, both the political stuff and reviewing comics, impacted how you write and the way you want to tell stories?
My past work's definitely influenced a lot, especially with the more journalistic, political type stuff. It's mostly nonfiction. A lot of it was research based, like go out and find the answers, find the reasons that backed up the things I was trying to argue. Like
Hmm.
that's really where I come from in writing. I was mainly a nonfiction writer. I wrote a couple essays that got published in anthologies, and so that's definitely helped me because it's kind of drawn into my fiction writing now because I'm able to better argue these ideas because I already kind of have the factual base underneath all
Hmm.
the characters and whatnot. So that's definitely part of the influence. And I've always loved just breaking things down into their smaller parts and seeing where they might connect in unexpected ways. And that's a huge thing in fiction. It's probably not as noticeable in nonfiction writing, but in fiction,
Yeah.
you see an author do that all the time. They take a genre to all the tropes, they try to figure out different combinations to do it. So definitely, everything's kind of led up to this and my style of writing for sure.
Sweet. I guess that's sort of jumping off of that as well. Then, when it came to the way that you've written these stories and the stories that you chose for Spark, because a big part of making an anthology like Spark is choosing the stories, the four of them that go into it, and how they tie together to tell sort of an overarching, maybe not an overarching story as though like they're parts of a single story, but to thematically match. Um, were you paying a lot of attention to the ways that you're exploring stories and stitching them together? Like you said, how multiple
Mhm.
different parts can sometimes seemingly be disconnected but come together. Do you find it in Spark the four stories do that? Are they meant to be standalone and just observe different ideas? What can people expect from the whole anthology?
So there definitely is kind of an overlying theme of characters who, um, yeah, something unexpected happens to them, and it kind of changes their point of view because of that. And that's one of my favorite ideas to explore. So it's something I've fallen back onto a lot. I did choose these stories specifically because they seem to fit well together, and I also more importantly, I was trying to keep them mostly the same genre, so that way it felt like a little more cohesive, and that way it would just also be a little better to market. So I could say if you're a science fiction or fantasy fan, you could
Yeah.
really get into this. Not necessarily just if you're a comic fan, you can get into this because that's just too broad, too general.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that it's definitely the grand scope of comics. Like it's as grand as, well, fiction itself, right? Autobiography, superhero comics, sci-fi, fantasy, slice of life, all that good stuff. All very fun too. So for folks out there, read whatever you want to read. Don't just get pigeonholed into superheroes. Um, I am very interested then to ask Luke, when you're writing in general, not necessarily these four stories, but just in general, on a creative basis. So, post political, post comic book review, though you may be still doing that, I suppose. Um, Given that it doesn't sound you're writing for the express idea of, cool, I'm gonna make Spark, I need four stories, or after this, okay, I'm gonna make volume two, or I'm gonna do a horror anthology. It sounds like you're just creating, letting it flow, and enjoying. um how many projects do you have on the go at a given time, or how many, rather, I guess, scripts do you have ready for production?
Oh, I've got, I mean, a good amount that would be ready to go right now that I just haven't found a use for. I'm always trying to work on something, not necessarily a comic strips. I also write short stories and poetry, and I do still write reviews. One of my favorite writers, Isaac Asimov, one of his
Oh,
like philosophies to help avoid writer's block and keep things fresh is just always be working on multiple things, because then if something's not feeling right that day, you can move on to another thing, and that way you're still doing something. So I've always got something I'm working on. That way I'm not never feeling stuck. But I do have a good back burner of scripts I'd like to use in the future. And I do have a plan actually for Sparks Volume 2 should the first one get funded. And it again kind of worked out in happenstance. I had a whole bunch of stories that like really felt like they fit together, and they were almost all the same genre too, so that's even better.
nice. Good for you. Look, that's fantastic. Like it's one thing where just doing what I do, and speaking of folks who make comics, and then being a big nerd who loves comics too, reading articles and catching what people say and stuff. One thing I've learned is a favorite author of mine, Jeff Lemire, basically does the same thing. He's constantly like banging out scripts, or he'll have something half done. He'll go, "It's kind of done right now." Put it in the bookshelf, pull something else out, keep going, and he'll swap them out until he's got God knows how many. I would love to know actually. But that way he can just go, cool, this one's done. Go ahead and draw it. Go ahead, DC, do this. Boom, whatever. So keep it up because that's fantastic. I've also never heard that about Isaac Asimov before, which is fascinating. And I could definitely understand like the reasoning behind it. So kudos for following it.
Right. Well, and Asimov's weird too because he also just wrote like research-based science articles. So
Hmm.
he truly was writing like everything. So he must have never been bored.
Well, I mean, I suppose, and maybe you can speak on this yourself, that um, if you're constantly writing like that, whether it's research, whether it's news articles, fictional reviews, prose, poetry, short stories, the sheer broadness of that experience, mentally, I suppose, it keeps your mental muscles working so that you can produce interesting content. Um, do you find that for yourself, or do you find when you get into like a writing mode, it's okay, we're doing fiction, I want to do just a bunch of fiction now, or is it whatever comes to mind, and whatever you want to follow?
Kind of at right now, it's whatever I want to follow. I usually try to have some sort of goal in mind. Like if I'm working on a short story, there's maybe an anthology I'm trying to submit to. It helps keep me more motivated to have a tangible goal, because sometimes, yeah, if I have a story that doesn't really have a purpose yet, I'll just kind of tinker with it for so long that like I hate it after 6 months, and I don't like doing that. But yeah, definitely writing different styles and different genres, not fiction and nonfiction, is super helpful because they both have different constraints. And I find I'm my most creative, honestly, when I have rules and I try to bend them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. In my last interview, I just did with Sam Beck. It's not out yet, actually. Maybe soon from now. We talked about just that, where the whole idea of like the freedom of choice is just too daunting. But the moment you give yourself like a little bit of a framework, it's like, okay, go. Um, I'm glad you're finding that for yourself too. It seems like you've got an extremely um, you figured out your workflow basically. Like the restraints to give yourself. You know how to give yourself a good deadline. You know how to just keep working so that you don't hit writer's block, or if you do, you can work your way out of it, uh, which is just exciting. And as someone who's producing an anthology with you as the sole writer, that's super cool, man.
Yeah. No, I definitely have to know how I work, because I basically only get to write like on my breaks and on my lunch break, because I got two kids. So when I get home, I got to cook dinner, do baths, get them ready for bed. Like my evenings are pretty well wrapped up. I might get a little writing in if there's something I want to get out and I need to get it out now. But yeah, most of the time I got to use that small amount of time I have during the day and work efficiently.
Awesome. Then you know what? We've been talking for quite a bit about yourself, your process, and all that. We've touched on the books. So important, massively important thing to talk about. Uh, Luke, how can people support you? What can they do? How can they get the book? And can you tell us about the Kickstarter?
For sure. So yeah, you go into Kickstarter. If you search Sparks Volume 1, it'll probably be one of the first things to pop up. I've got a whole bunch of different offerings for you to support the book for anything you like. If you like, getting bonus art, I've got prints that give for a little extra money. You can have yourself drawn into one of the comics too if you're into that. I have I had some custom hand lettering sketch tiers. They've all been snatched up. I'm considering adding a couple more if there is interest. But yeah, so I mean, it's just $5 to get in on the digital level. It's only $10 to get it physical, and even a bonus if you are an international customer, because I know those shipping rates they suck.
Hi.
They like double, triple the price of everything. So if you're an international backer and you whatever level you back at, I'll automatically bump you up. So that way your money is getting more for bang for your buck, and that way hopefully it feels more worth it. Not like you're getting screwed out of paying $40 for a $10 book.
Luke, that's really nice of you. And also the pricing structure is fantastic. So I'm glad you're keeping folks in mind. To just make it easy to get in, especially like the $5 digital tier. I always find to be fantastic because it's $5. Like hypothetically, in I don't want to be negative or anything like that, but sometimes when people think about getting into a Kickstarter or supporting a campaign, especially if they've never done it before, the fear is, well, what if I support it, it gets collected, and I lose the money, and the book never gets made for some reason. I think $5 is a small enough figure to go, it's $5.
Right.
The chance of getting the book, really cool. Chance of losing $5, it's a coffee.
Right. Well, and I really, because I mean, 3 of my contributors are from out of the country, and so I want to make sure if there's any fans of their work too that they would be able to get it. Cause yeah, my cover artist Donna A. Black, she's Irish. Fern Lamb, another one of my artists, they are from England. And then Nicholas Merez, who does one of the stories we hadn't talked about yet, he's from Argentina. So like,
Wow,
I want to make sure people can get it if they're fans of their work.
that's so nice. Then you know what? Talking about the team, I always, I continually praise the comics community because it's so extremely international. I don't know any comics creators who don't immediately are able to be, oh yeah, I know this artist, this writer, this colorist from like 8 different countries. I always love to hear the story of how did you meet these people?
A lot of it was honestly just me shouting in the void saying I need someone for a comic. And then these people came forward and I liked their stuff and we started working together. Especially with the ones that were for pitches for anthologies that didn't get accepted. It was mostly me posting on Twitter saying, "Hey, I would like to work with somebody for this. Like, who's available?" And I just happened to find a really great team that were from all over. The only one that is probably a little different was Donna, my cover artist. I sought her out because I love her art style. She does this multimedia, like kind of
Yeah.
abstract stuff. It just looks good with anything. So I just said, I want to cover from you. The only prompt I gave her was I just wanted to involve fire in some way.
Wow. That was your only prompt, and the cover for it is what you got out of it?
Yeah, I just wanted her to do something incredible and not give her any constraints, really.
Uh she's going to be busy in her career. Again, for you and I right now, I don't have it pulled up, but I will for the people at home. The cover for Sparks is trippy. It immediately evoked a lot of like emotional feeling, and it's visually just like wow. So yeah, I totally get it.
I love her, especially that cover. The more you look at it, the more stuff you find. Like you're like, oh, there's a little matchstick here. Oh, there's Donna's face.
Oh, that's your the cover artist?
I'm fairly certain it's Donna's face on there. It's someone's
Huh.
face.
That's cool. Oh yeah. That is so cool. Then Luke, you know what? Why don't you tell us about the other 2 stories that are in it?
Gotcha. So the other one that we have discussed is That Everlasting Peace. It's kind of a sci-fi romance story that I have been pitching it as a sapphic princess bride because it
Okay.
kind of follows the same structure where there's a parent or a guardian telling a kid a story to help teach them something. This one, the mother, her son comes in and says, "Mom, how do you know you're in love with somebody?" And so she goes and tells the story of this great space smuggler named Captain Rattle, who has a very deep bond with her ship named Theo that may or may not be named after her wife slash lover. And as Captain Riley, goes on her adventures, smuggles things here and there. The ship gets broken, things need to be fixed, and by the time it's all said and done, Theo looks nothing like when Captain Rattle first got the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So, in kind of a Ship of Theseus type way, it asks, like, can you still love something even if all the parts that you originally had it with are gone? It's completely different from where you started.
I love that take on that kind of a story. The Ship of Theseus, most famously in pop culture at least, was brought up in WandaVision by when Vision fights Vision. And folks, if you're not sure what the Ship of Theseus is, quick rundown. As Luke mentioned, basically, if you start with one ship, and then through damage, repairs, whatever, you've replaced every part of that ship, is it still the same ship? Um, and I love that idea when it comes to like a relationship or love, right? Like, because especially in long relationships, people change so much over time. Our interests shift, our personalities shift with age. That's a really cool story.
Yeah,
That's exciting.
it's an idea that I don't see discussed a lot in movies or in pop culture, especially like rom-coms and stuff like that. Like,
Mm.
they focus so much on finding, the one person, your soulmate, that's like just perfect for you, and then it's just happily ever after. But they never get past the happily ever after. Like, what trials and tribulations do they go to? Trying to find out who each other are and growing as people, as a couple.
Yeah, exactly. Luke, that's fascinating. And what of the last story can you tell us? Or if you want to keep it, spoiler free, that works for me too.
No, actually, I would love to tell more. The last story is called "The Fire Went Out," which, yeah, it has Nicolas Morez on art, as I talked about earlier. This one, again, kind of myth inspired, is kind of a retelling of the myth of Prometheus, but
Okay.
it sees Prometheus as a thief stealing something from a convenience store, and instead of Zeus being the vengeful god that's afraid of having his power taken away to get Prometheus, Zeus is a cop who kind of knows that this is not necessarily the right thing, that he shouldn't necessarily stop Prometheus, but, like, it's his job to uphold the law.
Hmm. I have to ask Luke because all of these stories they're fairly different, obviously in meaning, but obviously you've got a lot of references to mythology, politics, and all that stuff. Um, when you're crafting these stories, and I'm gonna end up asking about how you chose the creators for it, and the mood you're going for. But when you're writing the stories, because as you've explained them, right, they don't seem super connected, right? You've got like morality of stopping a thief who's taking fire from the gods giving to humanity, um, you know a relationship through time and things like that. Um, I guess the question I want to ask, and maybe I don't even have the words for it, is just the strings that make them united as an anthology. Um, yeah, I don't even know how to ask the question, Luke. What in your interpretation? What about the different stories? Because the art styles are really different, and really good. What made them connect for you? What was sort of their uniting concept or strand?
I definitely think it's the endings, how the stories end, and which may be why, like, talking about right now, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. It may
Yeah,
not
no
seem
spoilers.
super connected, but it's definitely because they all kind of end unexpectedly. They all kind of have a little twist at the end that, again, is supposed to turn these characters, either their heads on end or the reader's heads on end, make them really rethink the whole story and, like, the ideas behind the story. So that's really, I think, the connecting thread of Ulm is, like, finding those ideas in unexpected places. Those little twists that kind of upturn our lives and make us rethink ourselves.
Beauty. Then folks out there in YouTube land, Sparks Volume 1, check it out. It sounds complex, mentally like you might have to do some work, but also lovely. And just as a recap, Luke, because I want to make sure we mention it at least twice, if not three times. Um, Again, folks can go to Kickstarter, search up Sparks Volume 1, look for Luke W Henderson, and
Mhm.
they will find for the first tier, $5 for digital, $10 for physical,
Yep.
and then from there it goes up, and someone could get themselves drawn into the book.
Yeah.
Awesome. Uh, then I guess for my next question, because I like people to get to know
Mm.
the creator. As you mentioned, you've got two kids at home. You've done quite a bit of political writing. Um, when it comes to what you're into and what sort of inspires you, um, other than Asimov, because we've touched on him already, what inspired you to get into comics specifically?
So my comics origin story is kind of unlike. I feel like a lot of people, like, they've been reading comics all their lives, or at least they read them as kids and came back to them. I read them a little bit, but they never really like hooked me in or stuck with me. Probably my longest run with comics was I had a subscription to Shonen Jump, and I was into
Oh,
manga in middle school. So I was really into One Piece. That was, I loved the just pirates were my thing
oh
back
yeah.
then. But in 2018, I was having kind of a rough month, and I was just feeling really nostalgic for something I read as a kid. And I remember my English class, we read Mouse by Art Spiegelman. So I went to the thrift store to find a copy, and I got one and read it. And that just kind of made me, was like, I've always wanted to read more comics. Like, let's actually do this for once. So then the next thing I picked up was The Killing Joke, because I had just watched a YouTube video about Alan Moore and his Hermeticism and just kind of how kooky he is. And
Yep.
so I read The Killing Joke, and I loved it. It was not at all what I expected, because it's really a deep dive into who is Batman and like why he and Joker almost kind of sides of the same coin. And then I jumped immediately into Promethea by Alan Moore because that sounded fascinating, and it was completely different.
Wow. Yeah.
And just kind of from there, I just started buying more, reading more, find out what I like. As I started writing too and kind of breaking down comics, have led to reviewing and then writing my own. I just always wanted to tell. I've always wanted to be a storyteller, but comics I think has such a unique, special way to do it, because it's like got all of the good things about a movie and all the things about a book smashed into one. Like, one of the things about movies is, like, they move at your own pace. You have no control over them. So imagine having, the script, of the movie made into stills for you. That's basically what a comic book is, and I love it. I think it's one of the best mediums for telling stories right now.
Oh, agreed. Anyone who has watched my show, I'm pretty sure that comes up at least once every other interview. And you're correct. At least in my understanding, not that I'm a professor of fiction and storytelling, but I would agree. It's a fantastic medium to work in for anyone. Then an obvious question then for me to shift away from comics for a moment is, as you've mentioned, you've written prose and short stories.
Mhm.
When you're writing in the traditional format, I guess I'll call it, what is it that you've written about, and how can people support you there?
So I mainly right now write short horror stories. I've done a little science fiction, but it's just not grab my interest as much. What I mainly write about is I try to draw on my own experiences and like kind of find unique ways to tell horror through there. So like I'm non-binary, and so like things that involve that really have inspired me lately. Like the feeling that don't really fit in anywhere. You feel like you're in
Mm.
between two things, and neither side really wants to claim you. Like, so kind of fear of fitting in and stuff like that. Right now, I mean, I don't have a ton of short stories published. I do have one called "Putting It All on the Page." It's on a site called Sage Cigarettes. That one's
Oh
really
yeah.
cool because it's actually about someone trying to make one of the first comics, and they get this mysterious feather quill that ends up being like kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
But other than that, just I've put a couple of pieces of short fiction in some zines, and support me. Just follow me on Twitter and look up whenever I share stuff, because still kind of working on getting that front out there.
Beautiful. It's not an easy thing to do, the whole social media game. But unfortunately, yeah, it is very necessary. Yeah, that's a whole game in and of itself.
Indeed, and especially I feel like there's more writers of prose on social media than there are writers of comics, so there's a lot more competition, a lot more people wanting eyeballs.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. It's fascinating. So I guess a quick question I like to ask is, for Sparks Volume 1, just so I'm clear here, um, is this your first Kickstarter, and is this your first uh, publishing of comics, I guess?
It's my first Kickstarter that I'm running by myself. I did have a 6-page comic and an anthology in September called Corrupting the Youth that I was also helping out with promoting. And then before that, I got a 3-page comic and a zine called Orlok Lives, which was celebrating 100 years of the Nosferatu film. I do have a couple coming too, and next year I'll have a 10-page in Project Big Hype Volume 3, and then in an anthology from Foreign Press Comics called Comics from the Kitchen, which may involve pirates.
I feel like it's a common theme for you. Big fan of pirates?
I am a big fan of pirates. I don't write them as much as I'd like to, but hopefully more so in the future.
Beautiful. Well, with the sounds of it, I have no doubt. It seems like you've got your fingers in a lot of pies there, and that is awesome. Um, I think then, Luke, truth be told, well, rather quick, we've burnt through a lot of the stuff I want to make sure we touch on for your Kickstarter campaign.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you feel we haven't yet talked about that people should know?
Oh, honestly, not really. We've been pretty thorough, and I talked about, I think, everyone on my team and all the stories and all the tiers. Other than just would love your support. We got 18 days left of fun, and it's plenty of time.
Oh, funding as of now, Luke, how much? Oh, where is the link you sent me? Where are you at when it comes to the funding currently?
I believe I'm $3 shy of $700, so I'm like 35% funded right now.
Nice. That is fantastic. So plenty of time, easy to get done. Folks out there, links down below. Click them, support them. $5 for digital, $10 for physical. Probably what I'll get because and you get yourself drawn into the book. Oh, you mentioned you totally sold out of the hand drawn tier. Explain that in because it's fascinating when one of the higher tiers like goes. I always love that. So yeah, what does that involve? And you mentioned you may or may not add more. So yeah, what was that tier?
So at the $100 tier, it's a hand lettered sketch. So I do hand lettering just for fun. Like I'll take a poem and write it out in pencil and inks, and then I'll use fun fonts and stuff to make it look 3D. And I'll also ink it too using hatching and stuff like that to give it more texture. And I also hand color it using markers. It's just a hobby of mine, but I figured I'd throw it out there, see if people would like it, as a bonus to get with the book. And yeah, I had 3 spots and they got snatched up real quick. I'm probably going to add some more, but I just need a little more time to think about it, because they take me for the one that I have displayed on the Kickstarter. That one took me a week, and that's not very many words because it's a fake recipe. That it was basically mac and cheese that was supposed to go out of control and have wacky ingredients at the bottom. But so I figure for a 3 stanza poem, that's going to be multiple pages. That's going to take me more time. So I just don't want to overdo it.
No, absolutely. I actually, um, a while back, I spoke to the creators of a comic called Bestiary, just like yourself, kickstarted it. And one of their tiers was basically a hand drawn sketch of some sort of monster that would live in their universe. And they ended up with like, God, I don't know, I think more than 100. And so
Oh my.
yeah, so they were posting like, hey, we're getting through them, but here's how many are done. and it was like, yeah, 100 plus, I think was the end goal. Um, they've done it. I believe they've got them all done and they've shipped, which is awesome. But yes, totally understand that it's a lot of work to do, especially as a creator, because you have all this other stuff you're already doing, as you've explained, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's like, okay, cool, I've got to make some sort of prose into this 3D drawn thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird balance where like clearly they're going, so I would say do more, but like yeah, you don't want to kill yourself either.
Right. Right.
uh, you know what? A great question I think to ask, and I'm really curious now is given your visual capacity for storytelling, clearly, you're good with letters. Um, I believe for all four stories, you have a letterer for each of them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why? Do you, like clearly you could do it, right? Like you have the talent. Um, so what is it that made you want to grab a letterer? Was it just a workload thing? Was it frankly you don't like to do it, understandably? Yeah, like what was the choice to add letters to the team?
It was partially just I wanted to work with more people who I've been wanting to work with, so that way I could build more connections with them. And some of them we had pitched stuff to anthologies, and it kind of fell through, and I just haven't had an opportunity for them yet. I would eventually like to letter some of my own stuff, but I have not practiced enough digitally to do it, and I think that's where my big hang up right now. Like I have tried doing it on Photoshop, and it with just with some playing around, it looks okay, but I just like some more practice on my own before I do that. But I do love hand lettering, but I am not doing it like how the old pros used to do it, where they would like draw it and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife and then put it on the page to photocopy it. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to learn to do it digitally, basically.
fair enough. Yeah, it's I have a feeling when you finally go to do it, because the pictures that are up online, and again, I'll have one come up. Um, they're really nice. So I have a feeling that when you go to letter something and you're finally, comfortable with it to do it, it'll look really cool. So yeah, overall, look, I find you're an extremely talented person.
Thank
With
you.
a yeah, with a fairly diverse set of skills, which is always interesting. Um, then you know what, Luke? A fun question that I like to ask once in a while. For folks that read comics and collect comics, they often themselves have, well, I said it, they have cool things in their collection. Whether it's comics on a wall, Funko Pop figures, something out there. Now, you, unlike some of the folks I've interviewed, you haven't been just comics all your life. So you've been into other things and different creators
Mhm.
and writers. Um, Luke, what is that summative thing that if you were like, hey, this is my collection of cool stuff that I love for me, maybe it's not the most valuable thing, maybe it's not the rarest thing, but what's Luke's thing? What's that cool thing that you're really proud of?
Ooh, well, I do have a ton of books, just the prose books in my house, like probably too many. I think we have up to 600 right now.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, what we like, my whole family, we're big avid readers, so we like to buy books that we hope to read one day. So they're on our shelves and on the to-do list.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't have a huge individual issue comic collection, mostly just because it's bulky and I do prefer reading an entire story at once, so I love trades. But I do have almost all of Sandman collected.
Ooh.
But probably my thing I'm most proud of was I bought a copy of The Dreamer by Will Eisner on Thrift Books, and when I got it in the mail, I opened it up. It's got his signature in it.
No way.
Yeah, it cost me $4, and I got Will Eisner's signature.
Jeez. The things you get sometimes. That's so cool. And how was the book, by the way?
The Dreamer, oh, it's great. It's only about 40 pages, so it's a nice short read. And it's during Will Eisner's time when he was writing for Kitchen Sink Press, so he was really like experimenting and pushing the envelope. Like, he's probably one of my favorite comic writers for a lot of obvious reasons, but the more specific reason is he really likes to use the environment like as his panel border. Like the edge of the panel will be like the edge of a desk, and then like the next room is like the next panel. He just
Yeah.
does a lot of really cool stuff. He almost seems to like think of the whole page first, not just individual panels when he's like writing. It's as the Dreamer does that really well because it's kind of a autobiographical story about him trying to break into comics. And
Oh,
so there's a
cool.
lot of, newspaper desks and editorial staff rooms that, that's kind of what the scenery is.
That's so cool. I will have to pick that up for myself somehow. Um, awesome. And yeah, to be able to get a signed copy of it for $4. I mean, to get the signed
Right.
copy at all, but yeah, jeez. Then you know what? Talking about panel work and stuff. So we've mentioned you've written quite a bit. One of the things that does make comics unique, as you mentioned, is it is a visual and written story medium because you can do a lot with the pages. Um, and some folks do very easily go through and simply write, panel one is stage one or whatever image one, two, three, and so on. Much like, say, Watchmen, right? Um,
Mhm.
when it came to creating comics, because it is so different than your other work, whether it's research based, political, or reviews, did you frankly play a lot with paneling? Is it more of a conventional, like 9 grid? What can folks expect visually when reading your book?
So for Sparks, probably more conventional. The only one that's fully complete right now is the Fire Went Out, and Nicholas did do a lot of different things off script with that one that I love. Like there's a part in there where it's just a just big old Zeus's face that's not attached to really any panel in there. So he definitely experimented more, especially because I was trying to imitate like Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips in this book, and so he like was like, "Can I like add some more panels to kind of like make this a little slower pace?" I was like, "Yes, please." But
Nice.
other than that, probably more traditional paneling for these stories. I do love to experiment, but just for these specific stories, I didn't have anything particular in mind. I want my artists to let their freak flag fly.
Perfect. And about that too, like what level of creative control did you give them? It sounds like quite a bit. Like if they came up with an idea, you were good. But I always like to ask because it, some people treat it as a partnership. Some people treat it as I've written it, you're drawing it, do it. Others just they go out draw it. I don't care. Where do you sit on that spectrum of like authoritarian? This is what you're drawing to just like draw it. Where would you say you sort of sit?
Probably smack dab in the middle because I love collaborating. I love having partnerships over just sending a script and getting back whatever. I like when my artist will send me thumbnails and then we can like talk about it and discuss it and like tweak it along the way. In my scripts, I usually dictate camera angles and character positions, but I'm never like heartfelt really sold on them. Like if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I'm definitely also one too. When I get the thumbnails back, I will take my script and I usually chop about half the dialogue because I'm like, there's too much. There's too much.
Beautiful. It's always interesting. Like I love asking this kind of stuff. Because when you get to see the creative process at work, it's interesting to see how different people react and just what they're willing to not sacrifice, but like in order to be able to deliver the best story possible, you're like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. Take all of that out, or oh, we have to keep X thing in or whatever. So it's cool to hear about the process. Like, thank you for sharing.
No problem. I mean, really, every medium of writing is a collaborative medium. Just comics, I think, is even more of a collaborative medium because there are, up to sometimes 4 or 5 creators on there that have their own voice they're trying to express. So it really is a team project. So, I mean, like with prose, there's one author, but, there may be 3 or 4 different editors who went through and looked at that and gave their suggestions as well. But I think the majority of the decisions come back to that one author. Comics, not at all.
Yeah. Um, beauty. Then you know what? I guess you've already kind of mentioned you have everything lined up for Sparks too. Um, or not everything, I suppose, but you have enough there that it's already an idea. You know, with hypothetically with Sparks 2, would you want to use the same teams, a totally new, set of people? Uh, if and when number 1 gets fully funded and out the door, for number 2, what would you want, and I guess what would you do differently?
Well, I do want to work with more creators that I haven't gotten a chance to work with before. So there may be some repeats on the teams, but mostly it's going to be new people just because I want to build those connections. I want to get, working with some of my favorite creators. Volume 2 is probably going to be more comics about the same page length, but shorter comics. That way I have more stories to tell and I can show more styles of art. But other than that, yeah, it's still kind of in the works. I have most of the scripts written and kind of a short list of people who I want to ask, but nothing set in stone yet.
Perfect. No, I love it. I love the ambition, and the prep, frankly. So then, you know what? We've covered a lot. Again, folks out there in YouTube land, links down below. $5 for the digital, $10 for the physical, and it goes up from there. And get yourself drawn into the book, because that is the coolest thing. Then Luke, some fun, easy questions for you. My last 2. At the moment, what are you reading? And not necessarily comics, just what's got your brain happy?
Well, right now, I used to love this series as a kid called Cirque du Freak by Darren Shan. So
Oh yeah.
I'm reading that right now. I'm on the second book, which is The Vampire's Assistant. And I'm probably going to finish that up tonight. But I'm also reading, which comic? I just started Scotty Young's, oh my God, I'm blanking on the name.
It's the one with the
Me
monster,
You Love
right?
in the Dark.
The Me You Love in the Dark. Yes.
Yep, I just started that, and then I'm also working through a poetry book. It's called The Mobius Strip Club of Grief by Bianca Stone, who she also writes poetry comics, but I have yet to track down her poetry comic collection in one of my libraries, so I'm still looking for that.
Right on. That is super cool. You overall, Luke, I have to say you are definitely one of the most and again, take this in no bad way, because it is not meant that way at all. You feel like an extreme generalist. There's nothing that you won't work on writing wise that you won't take in when it comes to what you're reading and enjoying. And I think it comes through in, just from what we've talked about, the variety of what you're creating. So keep it up. Like, keep going.
I've always been that kid who's just been like interested in everything and wants to know everything about everything, and I kind of have to rein myself in sometimes. So that's really where that comes from.
Perfect. Well, I hope you continue to enjoy and continue to create. My last question for you then, Luke, very simple, very easy, I hope. What is it that you want the folks out there to know?
Just that I would love to have your support for Sparks Volume 1. A lot of these stories are really personal to me, so I would love to have them out into the world, and I would appreciate anything where it's just word of mouth or actually pledging to the campaign.
Beautiful. I love it. You heard them, folks. Get going. So in that case, Luke, absolutely. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. I look forward to seeing what comes next for you. And folks out there in YouTube land, as always, links down below. Like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day. Yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns. Can't find issue 2? Collector problems, cliffhangers, mysteries. You need answers. When did Batman become Green Lantern? I get it. True believer, not lying. Always up for an awesome summer crossover.